Do we have establishment of a quorum?
Okay, so this meeting is now being recorded and we do have a quorum present.
Okay. So then I would like to hear a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting.
I move to approve the agenda for today's meeting.
I will second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
I'm sorry, did I hear an opposition? No, okay. All right, so the next thing on the agenda for today is we need to get a motion to approve the minutes of the past meeting, which include the WebEx virtual Apfo meeting. Do I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? No, okay. So thanks everybody for being here today. I'm here from sunny California, so I'm not in Maryland. And Todd has to leave in the middle of the meeting today, so I'll be taking care of the meeting today. The first thing we have is the state-rated capacity process explained by, I believe, Chuck Boyd of the Maryland Department of Planning and Jamie Bridges. So are they online and ready to go?
Yes, both are online and ready to go. And Jeff Delmonico will be pulling up and sharing their presentation. So I want to thank them very much for being here this evening. I really appreciate them attending and helping us out. So actually, if you can show the, yes, thank you, Jeff.
Okay, I'm now here. Again, thank you very much. My name is Chuck Boyd. I'm the Assistant Secretary of Planning Services for Maryland Department of Planning. And I'm very happy to be here to provide some insights on the state-rated capacity system. Although I will first acknowledge that we actually do have an expert on this, which is Jamie Bridges who's the planning manager for the Interagency Commission on School Construction. And so I want to really, again, thank you, Linda and Howard County planning staff for inviting us to share with you some basic information about state-rated capacity and how it's often used for adequate public facilities. Next slide. So we got two questions that were sent to us as part of your agenda, and we have put those here. How is state-rated capacity used for state funding of school construction? And again, that will really be focusing on the real purpose of the state-rated capacity formula. And there is a COMAR reference here for you. And again, Jamie will really focus on that one. I will try to address some of the how do local governments use the state-rated capacity SRC as part of their adequate facilities to manage development approval. I'm going to go over the state enabling legislation, recap some of the work that was done back in 2012, as well as our annual reporting process. Next slide. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Jamie, and he's going to go over the state-rated capacity system. Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck. And again, thanks everyone for having us tonight. We love talking about this kind of thing. Why don't you flip to the next slide, please? I like to keep it pretty simple. What is state-rated capacity, or SRC? In general, the SRC is the number of students that the state determines that a school can accommodate. Like to keep it pretty simple. Next slide, please. So I'll talk a little bit about how we set up the SRC and also how we use the SRC. Starting with, how do we determine the SRC? The SRC is estimated at the ed spec phase, at the schematic design phase, again at design development, and even when construction drawings come in. Is estimated a bunch so that everybody is on the same page, so that when the SRC is set, when the school is open, everybody will be on the same page. The SRC can be updated, and it can be updated per a local education agency's request when the LEA changes the use of educational space in a school. It should be noted that the IAC cannot determine or change the use of educational space in a school, and the IAC does not decide when to update the SRC either. Next slide, please. Just going to walk through a little example here of how an SRC is determined. Elementary schools are a little simpler. That COMAR link that was on the screen before, if you want to revisit that, and you're really a nerd like I am, you can get deep in the weeds on how to calculate the SRC for a big high school. But we're just going to keep it simple with an elementary school. This is an example elementary school. It's a 4-round school roughly, so there's four classrooms per grade. And so to calculate the SRC, you see in the second from the left column, SRC by room. That is the standard capacity per room by room type. So a pre-kindergarten classroom holds 20 students. Kindergarten classroom holds 22. Grades 1 through 5, 23. And then we have special subject classrooms like science, art, music. They are not counted as capacity at the elementary level. Special ed classrooms hold 10. And resource rooms or breakout spaces are also non-capacity spaces. So we simply multiply the number of rooms by the SRC per room, and then we just add it up. So in the case of example elementary school in 2020, we had a state rated capacity of 634. Next slide, please. So what happens in 2024 shortly after the new state law that requires all of the LEAs to expand access to voluntary pre-kindergarten programming? So you may want to change the use of your educational space. So in this case, we see that that a couple of classrooms, general ed classrooms, got flipped over to pre-kindergarten, and so now we have more pre-kindergarten space, and so that changes a couple rooms from 23 to 20. I think we may have added a resource room, but anyway, at the end of the day, you see that the SRC has changed by about 17, up to 651. So that is, that is a small change, but these are the kinds of changes that can happen year to year. Next slide, please. So this is the annual projected change for public school K-12 enrollment in Maryland over the next 10 years, and you'll see that there is a dip expected in 2026 and in 2027 due to the lower birth rates during the COVID pandemic. And so, if you were thinking ahead to next school year, you may have a few less students, but at the same time, we have seen a lot of strong net in-migration from international sources. And so in that case, you might want to open up a classroom and move it over as a resource space so that you could work with English as second language for students who recently migrated. So the point that I'm trying to make is it is the SRC at the school level. I would not say that it is volatile or even unstable, but it is variable and it can change year to year. Again, that is up to the local education agency's discretion when those things are changed. Next slide, please. So what do we do with the SRC? We use it to calculate the eligible enrollment for a school project. This is really a fun sentence. If you can follow along, eligible enrollment is the net difference between the sum of the SRC and the sum of the projected 7-year enrollment for a project school and for the schools adjacent to the project school. Essentially, that means the state is looking at supply and demand, not just at the school scale, but also at the schools adjacent to the school to determine what eligible enrollment is. Next slide, please. And ultimately, we use eligible enrollment to calculate the amount of state funding that we allocate to a school planning project. You can see the funding formula there. It starts with eligible enrollment, and then we multiply the eligible enrollment by a gross area square footage per student allowance, and then we multiply that by $1 per square foot. We multiply that by a state local cost share, which is determined on a variety of things, including local wealth. And that is how we get the maximum state construction allocation for a project that we are funding. The reason why we use SRC and eligible enrollment is because it is, we've been doing this for quite some time, decades now, and the SRC is sort of a normalizer. It keeps things fair. And one of the most important things that we try to do is keep things fair. Next slide. So what else can we do with SRC? Excuse me. We can use it to calculate utilization, and that is simply the enrollment, whether it's current enrollment or projected enrollment, over the state rated capacity. And that yields a percentage, which many of you know. 100 or more is overcrowded, and and under 70, that might be a little underutilized. So from a portfolio planning standpoint, we use that as a sort of as a rough guide, where the supply is sufficient and where it is not, and we can use that. We can map it. We can look at it on a variety of different scales, but we use it. It is a relative measure of supply and demand for us, but it is often found in adequate public facility ordinances, and that is more of an absolute measure of supply and demand. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to kick it off to Chuck to talk more about how the state enables APFOs.
Thank you, Jamie. Yes, so that programmatic changes at the local level are those things that can influence it, and they are very customizable per LEAs based upon the characteristics of their populations and the students that they're there to serve. So with the square footage of a school in one jurisdiction of a school square footage may be completely different in another school, even though it's the same square footage, because of the programmatic services that they provide their students. So just at this particular point, I want to highlight, just because we always, Department of Planning always go back to the law in terms of what we can do and what we advise local government. So land use article is where the provisions in the code, section 4-202, really sets up the parameters of enabling legislation for local governments to apply zoning and to regulate adequacy of their public facilities, whether it be transportation, water, sewer, schools. And then it goes more specifically in section 7-101, which I call the non-traditional ones. This includes plan unit developments and other types of tools that local governments are empowered to use. And one that specifically lays out is the planning, staging, and provisions of adequate public facilities. So this is where it enables local governments to use zoning and other land use regulations to assess and manage development to ensure adequate public facilities are provided for their community. And then there is a provision in 7-104. If a jurisdiction adopts an APFO, then they must provide a report to the Maryland Department of Planning every 2 years on those restrictions. Next slide. So one of the things I wanted to point out here is that back in when we had the Sustainable Growth Commission, we had an extensive research and collaboration with various interest groups, the commission themselves, and looked at the adequate public facilities issue through this work group. And they did a lot of research, and we were able to look across the state. we have not done an update of this report. So I'm just reporting on what it is there. There has been, to our knowledge, based upon the annual reporting, one municipality has rescinded their APFO, but 14 counties, 26 municipalities back in 2012 reported that they have one form or another of APFO. All of them had roads and schools in terms of the counties, and other counties had other additional restriction or other facilities that they would measure in terms of ensuring that they were adequate based upon new development that was occurring in their jurisdiction. Again, state rated capacity for schools was often used. In fact, in one form or another, jurisdictions use the SRC to determine or in their metrics for capacity and overcapacity in their schools of their schools. It is a standardized measure, so it's not surprising. It is something that the IAC and MDP maintain and work with the Maryland State Department of Education on getting the enrollments statewide so that you have a mechanism to provide that base information. And as Jamie pointed out, there's a simple math to determine the capacity. Local governments have used that SRC in a variety of different ways, and turn the SRC that's a state rated capacity to a local rated capacity. And then of course they apply different percentages, whether or not it's, they allow for that potential blip that you get and say, oh, we're going to allow for potential overcapacities one year and not going to shut down development. So we're going to allow 115%. Other jurisdictions say, no, we don't want to get to that point. We're only going to get a 90% or lower in that capacity. That's a local decision based upon their enabling legislation. Next slide. As I pointed out, we get every 2 years as an annual report on those restrictions due to APFO. And of those jurisdictions that have reported, and you'll notice that we don't have the ability to withhold funding, or there's no carrot, or I should say there's no carrot or stick that I can force local governments to report. So we have a total of 8 of the 14 counties here reported. 5 of the counties reported that they did actually have restrictions in calendar years 22 or 23. For Howard County being one of those, and we had 3 counties reported that they had no development restrictions in our last reporting cycle. So that's a snapshot of what other jurisdictions, how that their APFO has impacted development. Next slide. So I'm going to give you a couple observations that we have for you to think about, and we're here to answer any questions you have. The IAC created and uses the SRC to really allocate those limited capital dollars that we have in the state in the most efficient and equitable manner. It is, as Jamie pointed out, it's a core mission of the IAC of how do we divvy up those dollars in an equitable manner? How do we measure one school versus another? So the SRC was created and allows for those standards for us to apply. And it was created solely for the purposes of school construction funding. It has been used in other cases, as we've been talking about, as an APFO measure of overcapacity. And there are problems with that, as we've identified, given the fact that programmatic changes based upon characteristics of the population being served can change that SRC. Next slide. Second observation is that state APFO enabling legislation doesn't mandate that you use the SRC. You can use whatever you choose as your means by which to use to do that utilization. It's often used by local jurisdictions, but ultimately there are other options that a local government can choose. Next slide. And then finally, since there is such a potential unintended consequence of that change in the SRC, and it is controlled essentially through the LEA, it's really important to have close coordination between the LEA and the local government to talk through some of those issues so that you can understand why an LEA makes its decisions to move a particular classroom out of being a classroom and into a resource room, as Jamie pointed out, because of English as a second language, for example. And so you could have that dynamic situation where the SRC changes as a result of this programmatic shifts. I think that's the last slide for observations. So next slide. Again, we want to thank you for the opportunity to share this information with you. Hopefully it's helpful. We're here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, normally we do our questions at the end, but so we don't keep you guys hanging around. We have another speaker, right? Is the other speaker here?
Yes, but I think maybe we should do some questions. I think there's a lot of materials and we don't have to do questions to the end. So it's fine to go ahead as serving as chair to go ahead and have everyone take questions now.
Okay, so yeah, because they're here, so I think we should take questions now if possible. Now,
absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, I see lots of hands up, but you know what? I can't see the order in which they come up, so I just have to call on what I see. So I see Paul's hand, so can we start with Paul?
Thank you. So if I understand correctly, then the SRC can be used for funding as a measure for funding capital projects. It seems then the incentive for a school would be to hold its capacity down lower to be more attractive to funding. Is that a correct assumption?
I am definitely not going to speak on motivation of an LEA with regard to that. So that's something that I don't know if Jamie wants to venture into that, but that I'm not going to express an opinion on an intent of an LEA on that matter.
Yeah, I won't say what anybody wants to do, but I will say that, if I were looking to do a capital school construction project, part of my larger scale planning when I'm building that ed spec may be to review the capacity at the school buildings that are adjacent to that in case I do want to, rearrange things a bit. At that time, it may lead to a reduction in SRC. And if that's the case, it would lead to an increase in state funding. But as you can imagine, reducing capacity with the same number of students, if that school is close to the APFO trigger, then it could in fact close down development in a zone. So that is a delicate dance that goes on at the local level, and we just do everything we can to allocate our funds in the most effective and efficient and equitable manner. But yeah, that's a give and take on the local level for sure.
Second follow-up question: how is the capacity actually verified or checked by anyone, or is it just self-reported and yep, it's accepted as submitted?
That's a great question. When a school opens, when a new school project opens, the LEA is required to send us a floor plan, that has room numbers and room names on it, as well as square footages, and then comes with a room inventory sheet as well as a tally sheet where the LEA does then tally up the SRC, but then the state does review that, and if there is any questions, then we get to the bottom of it, and then that is when the SRC is set. And then Similarly, if an LEA wants to update the SRC, then they do submit again a floor plan with a room inventory sheet and a spreadsheet to tally, and then we also review that. And so it is self-reported. It's not super hard, and so most of the time we agree. But it is indeed self-reported, but it is verified as well.
So in our local jurisdiction, the LEA, I assume, is the Howard County Public School System. And
Indeed.
it's the individual school probably fills out that sheet, but there's someone at the public school system that validates it. Is that a fair assumption? And you may not know that.
Yeah, I can't say for sure. I think it works differently in different LEAs. Based on what I've heard. However, the facilities group, they really do sort of they're in the middle. So, program people deliver program, and they program space in order to do it how they want to do it. And then the facilities people are the ones who submit that work to us, who characterize that space. It doesn't really matter who does it, but there is a dance on the local end between how space is used and how it should be used.
Thank you. That was very
I
helpful.
see Dan. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dan. I was going to tell you. I see you.
Yeah.
So
well,
I can address that for Paul, just to let you know that we do not make our schools fill out the SRC. So that is something that is done in our capital planning and construction office. We do work with the schools to make sure that we understand the way they are using the facility, but we are the ones who determine the SRC and then send that over to the state for review and approval.
Thank you.
okay. Okay, Paul, you want to put your hand down for me?
I'm
Because
done.
I'm trying to,
done.
yeah, I
Yep.
see your hand is still up, but take it down for me so I can keep track. And then Mr. Wright, would you like to ask a question? I see your hand is up.
It is. Yeah. So my question has to do with looking at Comar 1439-25 and the approved capacity numbers for pre-K all the way down to secondary ed. How often has have those capacity numbers changed? Across the course of time, I guess is my first question, because I'm looking at capacity and I'm also thinking of different sized classrooms, buildings, and what districts may want to build that might be more environmental, more equitable, smaller, or more versatile. But I'm wondering about those capacity numbers, how often those have changed. Have they bumped up? Have they bumped down? Or has it pretty much stayed the same?
Well, I could start to kick that off. I will say that up until about 2 years ago, the Department of Planning was in charge of reviewing the state rate capacity updates, and now we're taking care of it over at the commission. However, Comar is something that is harder to change than like sort of a manual, or standard operating procedures. Nonetheless, we try to be diligent about making changes when changes are needed, and so anytime we I think we have we're on a pretty good cycle now where at least once a year we're submitting tweaks to Comar and to accommodate changes in our procedures. I can't say how often a lot of the capacity standard capacities have changed, but I do know that we are always thinking about it. I think we have one plan for I think we have one plan that we're going to propose for alternative ed, for example. So, we try to keep those capacities in line with what we think is reasonable for the here and now.
Okay.
Just to add on to that, one, the Comar numbers that you reference there have not changed for several years in terms of the classrooms. There has been significant amount, and as Jamie mentioned, many of the SRC duties have been moved over to IAC. MDP used to do them. We had a staff of like 1 or 2 people, and the state has realized the importance of having a robust agency on school construction and has got Jamie, many other people at IAC, and they have invested a significant amount of data collection. And we are really getting a better handle on the maintenance of buildings, the gross square foot analysis of new construction activities, and the types of uses of education spaces. So I do believe it's something that we would want to revisit in terms of what is the appropriate standard. It will take some serious deliberations, and it will be something that will take, a lot of debate. But it is something that we've gained a lot more data on lately. So I think it's something that in the coming years is right for us to revisit. As Jamie indicated, there is particular school types of facilities that may have a higher priority than a full revamp of the SRC system. But it is something that we need to continue to revisit as time goes on.
Okay.
All
Thank
right,
you.
did that answer your questions then?
Mhm.
Are you good? Okay. So Lisa Markovitz, your hand is up.
You. Hello. I was wondering if in the continued presentation time, if we were going to get more information on the relationship between overcapacity and funding, because we're hearing from a lot of different people that there's a direct, an indirect, and I think we need more information on that. Thank you.
So Chuck, I think to clarify Lisa's questions, one of the things that have been coming up in a lot of our meetings is that when a school system has system-wide capacity, but maybe certain areas are constrained, how does the state fund then new school construction, new capacity? What are you looking at when you help? I mean, this is a better question for Jamie. What are you looking at when you are allocating state dollars to school projects?
Well, it should be noted that we do not choose which projects are submitted. We evaluate the projects that are submitted to us, but I think it's fairly certain that schools that are very overcrowded are schools that are generally prioritized for capital improvements. Now, if there are more than one, if there are more schools than can be done, then that may not be the only method of prioritization. The way we respond to overcrowded is generally, if there are, a serious lack of seats, then that is going to increase the eligible enrollment. That is going to be a more fundable project because we fund, we try to fund enough to get every student a seat in a safe, healthy learning environment. That's our goal. And we also, in addition to our standard capital improvement program or our Built to Learn funding.
Sorry,
Excuse
it
me.
was not you. It was a cat. There's a cat here I'm trying to get rid of. Sorry.
That's all right. Cool. That's fair.
Sorry, I'm
but
outside
there
in
is
this
also,
courtyard and a cat came up. I'm trying to get rid of.
oh, it wasn't even yours. So we also do have, we have a number of different funding sources. One of them is EGRC, and that focuses on areas where there is growth, and relocatable classrooms are one of the triggers. But in general, areas of growth will get EGRC dollars, where areas without growth will not, because we do recognize that a very important part of having a safe and healthy and a sufficient learning environment is to have a seat in one of those safe, efficient learning environments.
Just for clarity's sake, so my question to you then would be, if a school system has a particular school that's over capacity, let's just say, but like 4 surrounding schools are under capacity, so there's the opportunity to redistrict, but the choice is to not redistrict, but to build capacity at that school that is over capacity, the state would fund that, as opposed to saying, you know what, before we fund that, we would ask you to redistrict. I think that's the question at hand. and that we're trying to
That's-
grasp and
So
understand.
Jamie, you might want to go, there's a slide before this that shows how that eligible enrollment is calculated, which factors in those adjacent schools. And so that's an important thing that in our determining what's eligible enrollment for funding purposes, we do factor in those adjacent schools into that. So if there's a decision to have a lot of overcapacity in one school, but under capacity in three of the surrounding, that negatively impacts the eligible enrollment for funding. Correct, Jamie?
Yes, that's true. We, as the state, we do not determine how educational space is used, nor do we determine which projects are built. And we only fund what we fund, but there is no maximum. And so we may fund the eligible enrollment, and it may be lower than the proposed capacity of a new building if there are empty seats at schools that are adjacent. We cannot prescribe that any redistricting is done, but we do recognize when there is surplus capacity in adjacent schools.
So in other words, Jamie, if an LEA says, "Hey, I have a particular school that we want to advance as our top priority," and it has capacity around it, and that particular school, the state may not fund much of that school, but the LEA can fund, 90% of it, but the state won't. So we don't establish that priority. We determine how much state funding is going to go towards that project. Correct, Jamie?
That is true. And then it is notable that if that is the project that is carried forward and additional capacity is added, then that will influence state support of projects at adjacent schools in the future as well. So, that is, again, we do not prescribe redistricting, but we do recognize when there are surplus seats in adjacent school buildings.
Lisa, does that answer your question?
For the most part, I know, I realize that they're not, direct formulaic answer to the question, but I did get more information that was helpful. Thank you.
Okay. And Brent, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. And this is more of a nuance on what was just discussed. Throughout the community, you hear frequently, unless a school is at 100%, the state is not going to fund it. You can see by your slides, you look at 7-year enrollments. Also, I believe there's graduated funding as opposed to an all or nothing assumption that the state will or will not fund a project depending on future enrollment. I would love clarification on that or validation on that. But one other feeder to that is the enrollment projections that are going in there. And at both the state and the local level, well, particularly the lower level, I can verify, they take into effect birth rate, cohort survival rates, all these great historical factors. But one thing that rarely is factored in other than projects in the queue are projects that may be initiated due to zoning changes. We're about to initiate something where all the village centers will be redeveloped. The Columbia Gateway Center will be redeveloped. Turf Valley, which is exempt from APFO, just heard they're getting a long sewer line run out to there, which may affect that. And all those things could affect state rated capacity, but this isn't all in a 1-year period. This is based on a long-term estimate. And I also heard a lot of back and forth between what's available in an adjacent school versus what's available system-wide. And that's a very important distinction in calculating these things. And could you just help us dispel a few of the fear rumors that unless you redistrict, hold off, or overcrowd a school, you aren't going to get any state funding for it to proceed?
Well, I'm going to let Jamie think about the answer. We do projections at the county level only. The LEA does individual school projections and we do use births and we look at in-migration, we look at cohort survival, but the state is only required and really, be honest with you, is capable of doing is at the countywide level. How will that projection, and then the LEAs are all required to either provide us an alternative and document it, or they sign off and we come to an agreement on that number on a system-wide basis. The LEA then determines how they distribute that in their districting process. And they do their own projections on a individual school. So the state, particularly MVP, does not do projections beyond the county level. It's unmanageable and something like this. And your point is well taken about the issue of new development coming through the pipeline. We are trying to do a better job of monitoring development and permitting activities, and we're going to try to get a better handle of that so that it can inform our decision making and in developing those I'll call sub-county projections and assisting that area. But right now, we have to rely on the LEAs all the way on that. So, Jamie, I'm going to turn it over to you for the rest of that question.
Yeah, I guess my experience with the LEAs and all the educational facility master plans that we review annually, and we do read them all, and we review the enrollment projections as well. And if I'm not mistaken, we have a number of LEAs that are definitely keeping track of how accurate they are, and often hitting that benchmark of less than a percent absolute percent error from a year-to-year basis. And so we know that there are some people doing some really good work out there on projections. Sounds like there's some big ticket items that are going on in Howard County, and that is something that'll have to get worked out on the certainly on the local level. But if those changes are reflected in enrollment projections, and I know there a whole heck of a lot goes into that, whether there's certainty of a development occurring, as well as how newer developments are generating students at different rates than have ever been before. We know that everybody's working hard on that, but we use the enrollment projections that are submitted to us in the annual EFMPs to determine eligible enrollment. That's the main input. As far as the all or nothing or graduated approach, eligible enrollment, it could be 100% of proposed capacity. It may even be more if there is a significant amount of overcrowding in the adjacent schools, but it also could be less. We do not have a minimum threshold for eligible enrollment. For example, if it is a percent of, a certain percent of the proposed capacity, below a certain percentage, we don't have any hard threshold on that. We generally we fund what the eligible enrollment determines. It should also be noted that in addition to the eligible enrollment, the gross area baseline, which is an allowance per student for each school type, is also really adjustable right on down to the kind of school and and how it will be used. And while we don't adjust COMAR, for example, the capacities of rooms, like often, we do adjust our gross area baselines to reflect how things are, trends and what the needs are for educational spaces today. And so as sort of that bubbles up, there's also a number of different add-ons that LEAs are eligible for, whether it's concentration of poverty or English language learners or net zero schools. So it's not all or nothing. And we work not just with eligible enrollment, but also with a bunch of other measures of a school to make sure that we get everyone as much as we can.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's very critical to the way APFO has managed to achieve the desired result. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So we have Jennifer and then we have Vanessa and then those are the only two hands I see. So let's do those two.
And
And remember we
Zadian.
can, huh?
Zadian also.
Oh, sorry. So let's do
Yeah.
these last few and then let's let these gentlemen go. We can ask them questions again later. We can go back to it, but we do have another speaker waiting to talk to us. So let's do Jennifer next, please.
Thank you. When we are talking,
Can't hear you, Jennifer. Can't hear you.
I could at first.
Yeah, you started off strong. Nope, still can't hear you. And it says you're unmuted. You may want to just check your microphone. Do you want to put it in the chat, your question, and then we can read it?
Okay, while she's doing that, let's hear from Vanessa, please.
Hi, everyone. I have a question that about a particular school in Howard County that is currently the most overcapacity in the county, and that's Bryant Woods. And my question is regarding the difference between the state capacity numbers and the local county numbers. And the current enrollment at Bryant Woods is 289, and that does not include pre-K. However, the state has our enrollment at 438. So with the current enrollment, that has us at approximately 120% over capacity. And we also have the only reason any of us have been able to figure out about why the number and the capacity was changed from 363, which is what it was formerly listed at, is that we have ALS and we had a MINC program added to our school as well. However, within a year, our capacity changed significantly and we never knew why. So I guess my two questions are, how can the numbers between Howard County and the state be so completely different for a school? And how does that then affect funding and the trickle down decisions?
Well, that's a good question. You know, I didn't have time to pull that one up as we were speaking, but I will note that the state does not change the state rated capacity for a facility unless we are asked to. It sounds like there's a lot of different things going on there, and so I would say that we could talk more about that. I mean, I'm happy to review that
That would
case.
be my
It sounds like
suggestion.
that's a major discrepancy.
Yeah, my suggestion would be is if maybe Linda and can get the information and maybe we can get with the LEA to look at that particular school and do the research and get back to you, because I don't think we can answer that question right now.
And
Yeah,
Vanessa,
I mean, I know
Tim
Dan's on the
Rogers.
call. He's
Yeah, Tim Rogers and can maybe answer that question. Maybe Tim, you can take it back if you have the ability to answer that for her. I don't think that's necessarily a state question more than a local.
It's
I'm
more
happy
just
to-
that it's, sorry, go ahead, Tim.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say I'm happy to add what we in terms of the capacity for that building. Like you said, it is 289. It was recently adjusted down due to some recent changes in regional pre-K programs there, which triggered on our end, again, the local end, a reevaluation of the building and the capacity rating for it. Happy to break that down with you and your fellow the folks from Bryant Woods and the PTA there if there's more information needed. And happy to talk with Jamie and Chuck about what we see at Bryant Woods and see if it needs to be adjusted on the state side as well.
You said changes with pre-K? I'm unclear what those changes were.
Yeah, it's
I mean, this is a smaller conversation, so we don't have to get into the details,
sure.
but I guess that's a huge discrepancy between our local number and the state, which is why I brought it up here. Because I want to understand that, because that also is related to the recent construction that happened near our school that contributed to that significant overcapacity that was able to get past the Apfo waiting period and whatever happened there. So all of it is connected to what we're talking about right now, and that state number could directly impact the funding to address the capacity problems at our school. And currently the solution we're being offered is to redistrict.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, why don't
with
we connect?
any,
Why don't we connect at some point in the next few weeks and see if we can sort through some of those questions.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I would appreciate some feedback from the state too on that one, like how that number is calculated on your end.
Yeah, we're super available. We're doing a lot of SRC work right now, and so we're always warmed up and ready to go. So I'd encourage. I'll review this later today, but I'm glad to talk about it tomorrow with anybody who would like to. Is there somebody I should connect with
at the school?
Or, yeah, I mean, who should I follow up with on this one? I'd like to follow up on this.
I would follow up with the LEA, Jamie, so that we want to work through the LEA or Linda and the planning department. So we're trying to stay out of those local issues, and so we're going to work directly with your planning department or the LEA on these things, and they can then communicate back to the other folks along the way.
And then maybe you can share with the group when you get that answer.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
Jamie, I can say that would be myself or Tim Rogers.
All right. Okay. So, either it'll be me or your capital programs manager, and we will be reaching out to you shortly to talk a little bit more about Brownwoods.
Okay. Thank you.
Just real quick, I do want to emphasize, and we probably didn't emphasize enough, is there has been a big change statewide on SRCs as a result of Blueprint and the pre-K issues. So it will affect those schools, as Jamie illustrated, in terms of how the numbers are. So depending upon how pre-K is being accommodated in the various schools, you will see a change. So that is happening statewide.
Linda, did we get the questions in the chat? Linda? Lisa?
No, I'm listening. There are no questions in the chat.
Okay, so we didn't get anything from Jennifer then?
No, we did not. And Vanessa, you still have your hand up, and then Xavier lowered his hand. So I think
does Xavier still have a question? No. Okay.
Okay.
I believe my question should be directed to the next speaker. Sorry, thank you.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you. So we want to thank our two speakers for coming. That was really wonderful for you to take the time. We really appreciate it. And we'll follow up with any questions. Okay.
Thank you very much. Happy to do it. You have a good evening.
Yeah, really appreciate the opportunity to chat about this stuff. People around the house don't like to talk about it. APFOs at dinner. So it gives us a good opportunity to get out and talk about this stuff. And the devil's in the details. So anytime we can help, we like to.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Chuck. I really appreciate you all being able to be here this evening.
Thank you. Thanks for your willingness to follow up too.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Take care.
So our next speaker is going to talk to us about finance. That's correct?
Yeah, so I'll introduce Rafu, who is our Director of Finance. He's going to be presenting to you some of the questions that you all had regarding how do we levy our taxes in Howard County. So Rafu Ighail from our Director of Finance. I'm sorry, did I butcher your last name, Rafu?
This was okay. It's a difficult one, so G side.
I'm sorry.
Can you say it for us?
It's okay. You're good.
Tell me how you pronounce your last name.
Yes. Well, my name is Rafu Ihile. The G side.
Oh my gosh, I was way off, Rafu. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's a pleasure to be here. I don't think my presentation will be as fun as the Jamie and Chuck. I think their presentation was very to me, very exciting because at least I understand what our revenues go to. But today I think what Linda asked me to chat about was pretty much both impact, all the fees we collect that we do use in the county, and which most of them are directed towards, some of them are directed towards schools. So Linda, if you go to the next slide. Okay, I think the next one, this is your agenda. Next one. All right. My main focus this evening will be on excise taxes and impact fees. So next slide, please. So impact fees and building excise tax are kind of fees and taxes that enable local governments to collect revenues from builders, which is to help build public facilities because of the development that is occurring from those developers, and excise fees is forcing us to now build those public facilities. So we do collect them from both residential and commercial. So I'll give some examples later on. So next one, so I can kind of dive into each one specifically. So impact fees, these are really closely related to projects from either a developer or somebody adding a new building or doing something to their home, because we believe that by increasing the capacity of your home, that may force the county at some point or require the county at some point to now build public facilities. For example, schools, fire stations, and stuff like that, or even some road improvements. These fees enable us to adequately plan for those forthcoming development. Next slide. For building excise taxes, these of course, there's a law of the land. They are mainly, we collect these fees, and I'll talk more about the actual fees itself, kind of the rates later on. They are collected to help bridges, intersection improvements, new road constructions, and road improvements, because we realize that for these building excise taxes, some of them do have a huge impact on the congestions within the area that they are developing. So one, we need to improve bridges, because as a result of the capacity, the density, we may need to improve the bridge or intersections improvement. So we have to plan for all of that. And DPZ leads the effort in helping us manage these entire processes. So if we go to the next slide, for building excise taxes, the rates are kind of set in law. For residential is $1.90 per square foot. And so we collect these when they come in to get their permits, which is through our Department of Inspection license permits. So we collect all these fees, and we put them, they're set aside towards this development. Then for non-residential construction, which is mainly commercial, they're tiered. For office and retail is $1.90. However, for distribution and manufacturing is 97 cents per square foot. And for institution and others is equally 97 cents. So we collect these on an annual basis when permits come in, and we track them year over year. I'll give you kind of a detailed number. For FY, for last year, the year that just ended as of June 30th, 2024, we collected, for building excise tax, we collected $5.2 million. And for this current year, FY25, fiscal year 2025, to date, we've collected approximately $3.2 million. So we are on track to meet last year's collections. However, these are all based on development, so which is driven by other conditions like market factors and all. but we do know housing is critical. So hopefully we can keep seeing growth in Howard County, and we can keep collecting most of these fees. Next slide. We equally have a tax, a surcharge for public school facility. This one is equally tiered, but this is restricted only for school construction. These are not used for anything else. We track them, and they are sequestered just for schools construction. For example, the regular family charge is $8.15 per square foot. However, for residential, if you're adding an additional additions to your home, the rate is $1.32 for the first 2,000 square foot. And after that, the rate, we go back to the new regular fees of $8.15. So for senior housing, the rate is $1.32 per square foot. So addition to MIHU, which is housing issue, I think the rate is $2.72 per square foot. Affordable housing units within downtown Columbia, there's a special rate for that. Is $4.74 per square foot. So affordable housing project with state or county funding received after December 31st, 2020, the rate is equally $2.72 per square foot. And then any affordable non-senior housing project since 2020, December 2020, is $1.32. And all of these, again, are all restricted to schools. And I think these fees increased not too long ago. In fact, CB 58 2022 increased most of these rates, but I think the current county council increased the fees. So all that is dedicated to schools. And I think as of June 30th, 2024, we collected $16.7 million just for a school surcharge. And we keep a track of all of that. I do have a report that we issue publicly, that it goes to the council and to the county executive, and equally the state delegation for Howard County. And they receive this report, and we equally spend money from here on school projects. Go to the next slide. I know that Linda wanted me to talk about transfer and recordation taxes. I think this will be my last slide because we believe this is equally critical. Transfer tax do have some exemption. Of course, transfer tax is when you do sell your home or transfer the deed on your home to somebody else. When that happens, it comes to our office, and there's a tax for that. And the rate currently is 1.25%. That was increased not too long ago as well. However, there are some exemptions to transfer tax. If you're a political subdivision, you don't pay the transfer tax. If you're a non-profit hospital, a charitable organization, MIHU, fire and rescue members, teachers, and law enforcement do not have to pay transfer tax. And of course, the state rate for transfer tax is 0.5%. So we collect this, and as of 2024, which ended June 30th, 2024, we collected approximately $6 million. So it's $38.6 million for transfer tax. However, transfer tax is split 5 ways. That is between the schools, fire and rescue, recreational parks, housing, and the agricultural land preservation. The schools and fire and rescue and recreational parks do get equal share, but housing and which one did I mention now? Housing and agland do get housing and fire and rescue, sorry, get a lesser share of that. So the rate used to be 1%. So the county can increase this rate by 0.25. But the increase in 0.25 was distributed to just three of the 5 areas that get the distribution from transfer tax. And they are the schools, recreation and parks, and housing, which is community renewal. As for schools, they get almost close to about 30% now. And housing and community renewal, that's all they get. They don't get any funding from the general fund from the county, but the transfer tax. So, but that's how we split all of that. And it does take a little while because before it was easy for us in the department to calculate when it was 1%, because we know 3 of them got 25% and of the 1%, and 2 got 12.5. But of course, the 0.25 increase only went to 3 areas. So we've set up the system now to make sure that that collection is going to the right bucket. As for recordation tax, all the revenue we collect from recordation tax is going directly to the general fund. And the rate is $2.50 of each $500 that is due, that you pay in your recordation tax, or a fraction of the $500. And we collect that mainly when you're recording your deeds. At times, transfer happen and there's no recordation fee, but most likely the 2 of them go hand in hand. And so we've been collecting these now for a while. And we equally, for FY 2024, fiscal year 2024, we collected approximately $17.9 million. And as of this year, as of date, we've collected $9.8 million. So we're equally on track if all conditions remain the same, that we should be able to meet last year's target goal, which was $17.9 million. That's really all I have. So I don't know if I'm ready. I'm available for questions.
We'll open it up
Yeah,
for questions. Can we see that? There we go. Thank you. Okay, so I see Xavian's hand up. Did I say that right, Xavian?
Xavier, yep, you got it.
Okay. Go ahead, ask your question.
Hi, good evening, sir. Thank you for taking the question. I have a question concerning builder impact fees as it relates to schools, right? So if there is a school surcharge or a school facility surcharge that's charged due to construction that's going to impact a specific school, how are those funds treated? Are those funds used to improve the school that's being impacted, or is the funds going into a general bucket and then being, utilized across the county?
It goes into a general bucket for the schools, specifically for the schools. And during the budget process, the capital project process, we work with the schools to make sure that those needs, the funding goes to what the school system has identified as a need. So, and I know the needs of the schools are huge. So we do try to use some of these funds to fill that need, and equally recurring revenue to equally meet those goals. And most of the school construction, I think we just heard from the state, when we issue bonds for most of the schools, and we use these impact fees, school surcharge especially, as a pay as you go. That will reduce the debt service. But mainly we issue debt to fund most of the school construction because we know we don't have all the cash to pay for the construction. And also, school construction takes more than a year. It takes about 2 to 3 years for each school to come online. So we walk through that to make sure that we have adequate funding. Once the budget is approved, whatever is approved in the capital budget, my office walk through the funding process. So specifically to your question, Mr. Essen, that decision comes from the school. So we fund whatever they give us. So once the projects are done, we make sure that the funding goes to them, especially for school improvements. Yes, we send that money. And then the ones that we need to issue debt for, especially new construction, we issue the debt and then the money goes to the school to make those disbursements. So the schools are in complete control.
Okay, lovely. I would have thought that it would have been more beneficial for those funds to be, utilized solely by the school that's being impacted. I believe that would be a fair process, given that that school is the only school that's being impacted by the new construction, and that the funds should not be utilized across the county. That's my belief, that that would be a fairer process, really. Can you tell me why the funds are placed in a general bucket that can be utilized county-wide versus going directly to the school that's being impacted by the new construction?
I can speak to most of the details. That is school. The schools can probably explain that better. However, when we collect fees, we know who we're getting it from. We know the property that we're collecting it from, so we can definitely track that. Historically, we track that. We track where it's coming from because tax bills go out to the property, so we know exactly where that construction is taking place. However, that has not been the practice. It is not, as you know, the county. While we fund the schools, we do not have control of how the school spends the money. So it's difficult for me to now be dabbling into what we don't have control over. So I'll leave that to the school system.
Okay, and my last question, I guess, would be concerning deferred maintenance. No, it's my understanding that a lot of deferred maintenance is taking place due to the restrictions around being able to accrue money for capital expenditure. Can you say why there is a restriction around, accruing, or for depreciating, maybe like roof or other major items that will need to be fixed based on the lifespan or the item? So the last meeting, I believe I was told that the schools are not able to accrue money for major capital expenditure. Is that something that we could pretty much address to reduce the amount of deferred maintenance that we're having, county-wide?
But that's a great question because there's no a simple answer for it. It's the way we're structured. As you know, all schools' revenues, both capital and operating, comes from the state and the local jurisdiction, which is county. And if you hear from the state, they will tell you they do use the worth of the county to determine the funding. So when you look at it from that angle, the funding from the county is approximately close to 70%, and the state funds about 29% of it. And then, of course, about 1% comes from other funds that the schools generate. So it's the way it is. And when you compare that to some other counties that are not as wealthy, the state funds a greater share. We are happy to be an affluent county, and the school system is one of our jewel, and we're very proud of it. So we don't want to become a county that is struggling. We want to remain where we are. We are AAA rated. We've been for over 27 years, and we like it because the cost of borrowing is cheaper, and so and school is huge for us. It's one of the things we talk about when we talk to the rating agencies. Our schools are great. We love it and we want to keep it that way. However, our revenue is equally limited. They are all from taxes. The primary revenue is property tax, is the largest, and then we have the income tax, and so those are our two major revenues. So it is difficult. Just the state, the way the rules are, the schools get direct revenue, and they decide how they spend it. Yes, the budget is approved through the county, but the county does not control how the school spends the money at all. It's all based on how much the county has for the upcoming year, and I know that's a difficult a process to navigate because the needs for the school systems are there. There's no denying it, and equally the needs for the county are there. And so the only way to fix that is always to increase revenue. But unfortunately, we are not a business. We can't increase the cost of our products because our product is to take care of the citizens. So it's difficult. For our income tax, we are at the maximum level that the state law allows. And so our property tax, while we are not the highest, but we are equally not the lowest. So we are right up there. So that's a difficult one for elected officials. When all of us as taxpayers we definitely want to look at why you increase the taxes. So it's a difficult terrain to navigate.
And Refu, if I may just add in, one of the items that we had mentioned last time when the question was asked, and I appreciate the question, is the quantity of revenues that we also have. If we just look at it and we say for every facility, we have 78 schools are going to every single year stock $1 million. That's $78 million just for stocking, and not any additional revenues than to address the immediate needs now. So it partially does come down to availability of funds to be able to go with a model like that as well.
So Xavier, does that answer your question?
I believe so. I think I'll just close with a comment.
Okay.
So, as you rightfully said, sir, I mean, the schools is the jewel in the crown of Howard County, but there is widespread outrage as to deferred maintenance and also, overcrowding, that we're seeing, pretty much, on a wide scale, county-wide. So, I would, pretty much encourage you guys to look at, how we go about making sure that the allocation of funds are proper and that we continue to fund our schools and ensure that we reduce deferred maintenance that can, lead to, structural or any other kind of problems down the line, and also to ensure that students can have a, proper environment that is conducive to learning and fun and exciting. So I'll close on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Xavier. I think well said. We're working with the school system. It's a difficult challenge, but we're working with them, and we very much appreciate their willingness to work with the county executive. We have a liaison, a school liaison, that his focus is really with the schools, and we're very excited with the board, the superintendent. We're excited working with them because it does take some difficult decisions, and we're willing to make that. And we're happy to be partners with the schools. And the progress is, I know the chair of the school board is here, Ms. Marlowe. The goal is to keep working, and we are talking on various fronts.
Okay, thank you. So Brent, I see your hand is up. What's your question, please?
Thank you. And thank you, Rafi. We've worked together many times with PTA Council and other efforts. The topic of the day, APFO, traditionally you say, or you hear quite frequently, mitigation fees, impact fees, and all that isn't part of APFO. If that were the case, we literally wouldn't be discussing this here this evening. It is a critical component. The funding of infrastructure as we expand is critical, and the non-funding when we're flat. But there's a magic formula. Everybody should have gotten, or I've asked for the school facility surcharge chart to be posted to all the members so we can see what we're getting in one-time revenues to go toward one-time expenses, capacity expansion. And it's just like the fable of the lemonade stand. If your kids come in and start selling lemonade because they got free sugar and lemons in the kitchen, of course they're doing fine. But if those lemons cost $5 and the sugar costs $5 and they're selling glasses for $1 a piece, it ain't working. And that's exactly what's going on in Howard County right now. We're collecting some very high, very large fees for one-time expenses related to development and growth to use toward capital expenses, but we don't talk about what is the actual dollar per seat. What is the average number of units per kid? If we exempt things like affordable housing or over 55, how do we carve that out and put in the correct offsets? So at the end of the day, whenever new growth occurs, we have exactly the amount of resources needed to provide adequate capacity without any shortcuts or lowering quality of standards at a given rate to go. And some things our county needs to provide is every year, so we can figure out this fee, is the amount of square foot of residential development sold. We sure hear about it in commercial, but we don't hear it from the residential. What we need from the school system is a regularly updated, what is our dollar per seat to provide capacity for these children, be it in high school, middle school, elementary, or special education situations. And if you have those variables, you can calculate with some fair degree of accuracy what our rates need to be in order to offset the costs. And I know there has been some rediversion of funds for reoccurring costs coming from our one-time costs, and we need to look at that as well, because every time that occurs, it's stripping away our net resource. So, loaded question with a long introduction is, can you or the administration work with our current APFO committee to come up with the ideal and most accurate one-time impact fees that we need to provide adequate public facilities for our children? And I didn't even give the really loaded question. We should be doing that for all major capital expenses that have a standard of adequacy. And since you're on the hook, please.
Yeah, thank you, Brent. Yes, is a fully loaded question, and the short answer is we work with all our agencies, DPZ, to make sure that they review those plans, because they come up with all our zoning and planning, so they understand where the development is going to occur, and then we work with our inspection, licensing, and permits department to make sure that adequate fees are charged. But as you know, to increase fees, we could say that, but it has to go through a legislative process, and the county doesn't have the appetite of increasing that much fees. But however, once we're able to do what you just said, Brent, I don't think I know Linda and Bob Francis have been working really hard to make sure that we understand what those are. And once we're able to identify where the fees needs to go up, I don't think there's a problem in going to the council through the administration, which you'll be willing to go to the council and say the fees needs to go up, and this is exactly what they are for. Yes, it's something that we can work on. And for me, my goal is that. Sorry. Go ahead.
The administration or council could put together a bill any
yes
cycle to do this. And I got to say, within the PTA council, we have repetitively voted in unanimous support of this motion in order to provide market rate one-time revenues for one-time expenses.
And that's why during my presentation, I did reference that the school surcharge was increased, and I think the rationale behind the increase is exactly what you said, that there's not enough revenue to help fund the school system, and the council and the administration I decided it was the right thing to do. So we're collecting it, so the revenue went up because it used to be $7 and change. It went up to $8.15 per square foot. So that was an increase. But of course, as that increase happened, inflation occurred. As we all know, cost of everything went up, not by the amount, the rate that the fees was increased, which nobody anticipated. So the cost of everything for both the schools and the county and everybody else has increased. So It's just finding that fair balance, which is a challenge for everyone. Because by the time you think you've arrived at that fair balance, you don't control the market conditions. So that's a challenge. But yes, it's a good point. And the administration is willing to review that and propose a legislation to the states once we, the agencies, are able to come together and make those recommendations.
Thank you. We look forward to that.
All right. Did that answer your question, Brent?
Yes, I got it much closer. Thank you.
Okay. All right. And I see Lisa, you have your hand up.
Yes, hello, thank you. I wanted to point out that the impact fees are very, very different than the building excise tax surcharge fees.
Yes.
The impact fees, as we all know, were recently increased and by a lot, and these are collected at like different times and process times. And the building excise taxes, along with the moderate income housing unit fee in lieu rates, both of those things are capped in local code, but the
Yes.
increase that the council can even implement each year is capped by the building construction cost index each year. And I did some research to see if other jurisdictions did that, and they don't. They say to keep them in mind or to review them, but we actually have a cap in place on that. And the reason why I wish that was different is because when the rate is high and building costs are high, their costs are high, the council has been loath to, put even more fees on them when they're facing high costs, right? But that's the only time they can do that because it's capped by that amount. But then when the costs are low, they're capped by that low number. So it's a little unusual choice of indicator to use in that way. And so something that I'd love to see done in the future is to maybe rethink that indicator as a cap so that the council can do annually what they feel is an appropriate level of that fee to do at any given time. So I just wanted to point that out because people might be confused about the fact that those impact fees were largely increased recently, but the building excise tax, and then just an FYI, it's the MIHU fee in lieu rate as well, is very capped in this county. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think your question is, why is there a cap? Is that right, Lisa?
Well, I'd love to hear, like Brent was saying, what is the idea that the administration may have about whether that is an appropriate measure to retain? Thanks.
Okay. All right. Thank you. My mistake. I thought you were just making a point, but thank you for the research you did. You're absolutely correct. As for the cap, I would say I know why it was capped, but it's something we have quite a few rules that I have to follow, and so when it's capped, I just follow what the law says. Don't question it. I interpret it. I can interpret their intent. I can only interpret what the law says, which is a challenge because at times they tell you that's not what we wanted to do, but that's what it says. So if you want to change it, you guys have the power, the administration, the elected, the council, make the change, and I will go ahead and implement it. So if you are well, if I start questioning every cap we have, I'll be questioning almost everything. So that's not my role. My role is to you ask a question. I don't have an answer, a clear answer to say why it was capped. I'm sure that was capped pre my time in the county because it's written in the code. But it's something that I would recommend that folks take with elected officials. So see if they are willing to take off the cap. Because if only the county is capping it, I'm sure it's something that they can consider and see should they take that off. But we don't. We try not to make those policy calls that will impact our citizens, our residents. We just implement what the elected officials passes.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any more hands raised, but I myself have a couple of questions. So three things. One is, I can't understand why the excise rates are different between the commercial. Like, why is a warehouse paying anything different from somebody else? Because I don't see what the difference of the impact is on the roads and bridges. I would think warehouses, especially these Amazon warehouses, that they put a great deal more stress on our roads and bridges than some of these other, like Joe the plumber. So I'm curious if you can explain to me why there's different rates of excise taxes for the commercial. Second one I have is, I know years ago when Mr. Cummings was still alive, he said that in Howard County, uh, so as a county, we pay out money to the state. And then because, as you say, we're a wealthy county, we don't get all of that money back. So what I was told several years ago was that in Howard County, for every dollar we pay out, we only get 83 cents back. And part of that is because we are a wealthy county. So maybe you could talk to me about that. And my third question is the state transfer and recordation charges. So if you're a first-time home buyer in the state of Maryland, your portion is exempt. And the standard Maryland contract of sale says that buyers and sellers divide equally all the transfer and recordation charges every time you buy, every time you sell. So if you're a buyer and you're a first-time home buyer, then in Maryland, you do not pay your half of that 0.5, which is 0.25%. But do we get any of that money from the state back, or is that all spent on the state level? Thank you.
I'll start with the last question. We don't get any of that money back because the state keeps it. As for the first question, I think that probably will be more directed at our Department of Inspection Licensing and Permit, because they know the code and how buildings are. So me trying to dabble into why a residential building will be paying more in terms of excise tax compared to a warehouse.
No, on your,
Be,
sorry, what I meant was on your chart of the excise tax at the commercial,
yes,
on the bottom of that slide,
yes.
one type of commercial pays almost,
Oh, yes, office and retail.
yeah,
Yes,
almost 100% more than the other kind of commercial.
yes.
And I'm like, why?
Oh,
Why is that?
I think the reason is the footprint. As you can tell, for office and retail, there is more people who go into the buildings in and out. Whereas when you look at for distribution and manufacturing, less people go into those buildings because it's just for storage. And so it's storage, so you don't have to have, I would assume you don't have to use a lot of energy as opposed to office and retail, which is equally institutional and others, because they are mainly just a building, no more partitioning. So you go in there and it's more open. But it's something I'll speak to our DILP area to get more information. It just our DIP director happens to be with me at this. I'm actually at the conference, so I will be asking him some of those differences why we have office and retail at a higher rate than distribution, manufacturing, and institutional.
Well, I just think the
But
distribution should be higher because, I see all those Amazon trucks coming in and out, and I know how they beat up the road and the bridges and intersections and all that. So I'm just kind of trying to think to myself, yeah, I get it, office buildings, people going in and out, but I also think in these warehouses, we're seeing heavy equipment, big trucks, 18 wheelers. So I'm just kind of curious what the thought rationale was behind that, why that would not cost us as a county in maintenance and bridges, etc., equally.
Yeah, I think those are really good
you're
points,
right.
Laura. I think you
Yes.
bringing up and maybe, when the original apportionments were considered for excise taxes, it was not the case. And as you said, times have
Yes.
changed, dynamics have changed. I think Jeff Burnow's also on the line, and I think he maybe was going to comment. I want to put him on the spot. But he may also have some insight, but I think more or less it was just how we've always done things, that proportionality. So, maybe, and I don't think it's really in the purview of Apfo, but I think it's something that, perhaps maybe should be looked at as far as, like you said, the intensity now of those particular uses. And we're seeing a lot more of those last mile facilities coming into jurisdictions that you said are really using our roads more heavily than ever before, especially our roads.
Yeah, I think, Linda, I think you're absolutely right. What I was just going to say was that I think the road excise tax was first initiated back in like 1992. So that was obviously before Amazon and all these things. And it was based on a proportionate share, based on employees, basically. So an office in a retail establishment, well, the office establishment has a lot more employees than a warehouse. So more employees drive into the office, right? And retail has a lot of car activity too, because shoppers. So I think that's what it was based on. But it's a very good point. Now that we have warehousing that has, Amazon trucks and things of that nature, the impact of the trucks on the roads, so it could be looked at differently now, perhaps.
And then my other question was, how much of the money that we give to the state are we getting back at this point? Like I said, years ago, when Mr. Cummings was alive, he said it was 83%. 83 cents for every dollar we give out to the state. What is it now?
I don't know if we give, when you say give money to the state, I'm not sure. I think
So
what we
money
do now
that
is
we pay in, money that we pay in taxes, or money that we
Yeah.
as people in Howard County, we pay out, because as it was explained to me, so a lot of the counties in the state of Maryland actually send money to the city of Baltimore, because the city of Baltimore, although they charge higher real estate taxes than anyone else in the entire state, apparently they're always needing money. They spend more money per pupil in Baltimore City than we spend in Howard County. So they are constantly getting money from the other counties at the state level. So I'm just curious if you had some answer to what that number might be these days.
I don't, I don't know if I'll be able to address your question directly, but what I'll say is that the way the taxes are structured now, I don't know what it was way back then, but it's structured differently now, because we set out the state portion is very clear. That's why I was saying that I think it was the recordation tax, transfer tax. The state portion is 0.5%. Ours is 1.25. So we end up collecting 1.3% of transfer tax.
Yeah,
However,
I'm
that
outside of the
0.5,
real estate taxes. I'm not just talking about transfer and recordation.
no,
But
yes.
thank you.
And I think one of the other ones you may be talking about, maybe income tax, because the state collects all of the taxes on behalf of all the counties, cities, and everyone. And that, I think, I don't know, I think that Brett, I thought I saw you at when the controller visited the county council. And that was a question that was asked. How do you come up with the income tax distribution? And she said it's more complicated, because I know the council asks us that question every time. We say we don't. There's a formula, and we can calculate that formula. Whereas of all the other taxes, it's easy for us to calculate income tax, even though we know the rate, but they are being collected by the state. When you file, they're being collected by the state, and the state does this distribution throughout the year. And the way the formula has been explained to most of us is that they take an average of, I think, 2 or 3 years, because obviously most people file their taxes by April 15th, or the deadline, but there are folks who do not file till October 15th. They ask for an extension. While they've paid their tax bill, they don't file, so the state have to keep the money till they file to know the exact revenue that is coming to the state and the local jurisdiction before distribution. So the state has come up with a formula that unfortunately none of us understand how that formula comes up. But they're transparent. They show you how much they've collected and how much is going to each of the local jurisdictions. There are a few counties that have more of the affluent folks, and some of them drive a higher number of those income tax distribution, and so we happen to be one of those. I think there are about 6 or 7 counties that really does impact. So when, say for example, the volatility in the market, if there is the market crash, so you could tell our distribution is going to drop because it's driven by maybe that 1% of our population because they pay a lot. Whereas when the market is good, it may drive a bit. All of that is kind of evened out due to the formula the state uses. So when there's a down market, we may not feel the impact the current year that the down market happened. We may feel it a year or two later when they now do their reconciliation and realize that, hey, we've over-distributed to Howard County. Now we got to recoup that. But most of that revenue that the state end up distributing to local jurisdictions, especially for schools, a bigger portion of that goes to, say, City of Baltimore. Whereas for us, we've done a fantastic job in making sure that we're doing a good job, but unfortunately, the state does not reward us for that. So I think that's the only way I think I can probably address that question, because we don't collect and send, we collect on behalf of the state and we send their money. Whereas our portion we keep. The only one the state actually has control over is that. And of course, sales tax, we don't get anything from the state at all.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's a big portion that they collect. Because
Yeah.
our tax is over 6%, 6%. But that portion that they collect, they use, and some of that they probably distribute more to. I'm sure they use part of that for school, but most of them might go to the city as opposed to we getting anything.
Okay. I don't see any other questions. So I do want to thank you very much for coming. That was nice of you to take the time to talk to us. And I don't see any other questions. So, okay. So do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone
Good night,
opposed?
Good night. Thank you all for having me.
Thank
night,
you,
Paul.
Rick.
Merry
Thank you
Christmas,
for
Happy
all.
coming.
holidays. Happy New
Thank
Year.
you, sir.
Happy holidays.
Take care.
Yep.
Laura, can I ask you
Yes.
something real quick?
Yes.
When's our next meeting?
January 8th.
January 8th.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So
Happy
we-
holidays, everybody.
Have a nice
Thank you.
holiday, everybody. Thanks for
Take care.
coming. Thanks.